Классика называется. Правда.
That's classic.
Here you can see an animation of what the crew should be expecting inside their craft. Again, this being that deorbit burn scheduled for 8:37 p.m. Central Time. Thrusters will fire, allowing the craft to enter the Earth's atmosphere. Module separation will occur here about 27 minutes later on an altitude of just about 87 miles over the Earth's surface. The descent module will then go into entry interface, interacting with the Earth's atmosphere. The crew experiencing their maximum G loads at about 21 miles over the surface. The parachute deploy commands coming at about 9:16 p.m. While the craft is about 6.7 miles, 2 pilot parachutes will first be deployed, the second of which will pull out the drogue chute. Once that drogue is cut away and released, the Soyuz will then deploy its main chute. The soft landing rockets will fire just a few moments before touchdown. At that point, the Soyuz will be traveling at a descent rate of about 7.2 meters per second.
All right.
Also, after those chute commands are given about 1 minute after the initial command, the heat shield will separate from the descent module craft, and that will reveal those soft landing engines, which will fire just before touchdown, as well as the craft's altimeter used to signify and relay height readings of the craft to the engines. You can see a rough timeline here of all of the deorbit and entry dynamic events that will take place, starting off with that impulse burn, moving on to module separation, both the orbital and instrumentation and propulsion modules separating from the craft, eventually burning up in the Earth's atmosphere, while the descent module continues its entry through the Earth's atmosphere. It'll go through a controlled descent, burning off much of its speed just through atmospheric braking, eventually slowing down enough to register the parachute activation, which you can see towards the end there. Again, those parachutes, once they're deployed, will initially slow the vehicle down from its descent rate of over 230 meters per second to just 80 meters per second before the main chute is released, slowing it down to a much more manageable 7.2.
Unintelligible?
Ники. Будет утро в Казахстане. Хорошо.
Okay, let me know when the morning starts. Okay.
Сейчас как год. Я... Как что? Да.
What did you say? I'm just
Нормально.
talking to myself. Everything is fine.
Знаю. Почему? Задумин.
So getting reports that more helicopters are now in the air, departing from the Jezkazgan airport for the prime landing site. Among them will be many of the critical crew for this landing, including flight surgeons and nurses, and also the teams from RSC Energia and the Russian ground forces responsible for safing and preparing the vehicle for extraction of the crew, and also erecting the medical tent and any other necessary logistics facilities. Should they land directly on target, they will be in the southern zone, designated Southern Zone 6 of Kazakhstan, just to the southeast of that Jezkazgan airport. Exact landing coordinates 47.21 degrees north latitude, 69.35 degrees east longitude. By the time that they touch down, the 3 on board, Hatfield, Marshburn, and Romanenko, will have spent 146 days in space, 144 of those spent on board the International Space Station. All told, they will have completed over 2,300 orbits of the Earth. With that, they'll have a travel distance of just about 61.8 million statute miles. Among the crew, Tom Marshburn will have completed a total of 162 days in space in his lifetime. This was his second mission, his previous being STS-127, where he spent 16 days in space. Canadian Chris Hadfield will have completed just a few more, 166 days in space, this being his third flight, having spent 8 days on board a shuttle for STS-74 and 12 for STS-100. And the most veteran of the crew, Roman Romanenko, a second-generation cosmonaut whose father set a an endurance record at the time for his stint on the Mir space station. Will have just completed 334 days in space on his 2 flights, having previously spent 188 days in space for Expedition 20 and 21. But right now we are about 10 minutes away from that planned deorbit burn. Just a little over an hour now from targeted landing in Kazakhstan. Here we see NASA astronaut Chris Cassidy, who's remaining on board the International Space Station. Also on board with him are 2 Russian cosmonauts, Pavel Vinogradov, who took over command of the International Space Station, and Alexander Mazurkin, again another Russian cosmonaut. These 3 will remain on board as the crew of Expedition 36. They'll remain as a 3-man contingent over the next 2 weeks until the launch of the next trio of astronauts and cosmonauts to the International Space Station. That crew, scheduled to launch from the Baikonur Cosmodrome on May 28th, consists of NASA astronaut Karen Nyberg, Russian cosmonaut Fyodor Yurchikhin, and Luca Parmitano, an Italian astronaut from the European Space Agency.
Есть разворот, 4:29.
Maneuver confirmed, 4:29:15. Copy.
Т3, подтверждаю.
Т3 confirmed.
Вентиляция была.
Bow ventilation is off.
Не горит, я уже смотрел.
S9 is no longer illuminated. I double checked. Attitude control.
Не видно.
Yes. Confirmed.
Следующий.
We're in eclipse again. Next time 4:36.
Да.
I concur.
Свет связу включен, вижу.
Unintelligible.
Если крышка не открывается, это ничего.
If
Потому
the
что
cover cannot be opened, is that okay? Since we have the descent signature, yes.
Again, continuing to march towards that deorbit burn of the Soyuz craft, currently targeted for 8:37 p.m. Central Time. Command coming just about 2.5 hours after the undocking from the Rosviet module. It's a retrograde burn that'll slow the craft by about 128 meters per second, allowing it to drop out of orbit and begin its entry interface into the Earth's atmosphere, setting up for that landing in Kazakhstan.
So the HSW fan should be deactivated. Have you done it? Yes, we have. I've already reported. Thank you. Parus MKS. Parus ISS. Good luck to you guys. We are watching your telemetry. It is great, you know. It's just excellent. Thank you.
Throughout the descent, we'll continue to hear calls from Soyuz Commander Roman Romanenko, who will be referred to as call sign Parus, the Russian word for sail. Each of these Soyuz commanders selecting a special call sign for their Soyuz crafts. Just about 5 minutes away now from that deorbit burn. Once the craft completes its deorbit burn and moves on to entry interface, or the Soyuz is beginning to interact with the Earth's atmosphere, Roman Romanenko will give regular status calls as long as his communications are able to be reached. As mentioned a little bit earlier, communications can sometimes be a little spotty during these Soyuz landings, particularly due to the plasma buildup around the craft as it's passing through the high heat of the Earth's atmosphere, which can typically heat the vehicle up to over 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit during the higher peak heating portions of re-entry. Also, the International Space Station a little bit higher of an attitude due to some recent reboosts, increasing the range from the Soyuz craft to the station comm antennas, so comm may go in and out throughout, but as long as they have Roman Romanenko giving regular status calls to the teams in Koryov, Russia, the Russian Mission Control Center monitoring the landing throughout.
Compass, we have it good. Now we will have to open the SKD cover and then move on. When I see an A1, then I will do the contour, right? Yes. Okay. Okay, so 28. But the temperature is 28. Okay, so so it's all stable in the bottle. Great. Great.
A little under 2 minutes now away from that deorbit burn. Roman Romanenko continuing to feed status calls from the center seat of the Soyuz descent module. Canadian astronaut Chris Hadfield to his left is the board engineer on board. And then to his right, NASA astronaut Tom Marshburn rounding out the crew of 3 returning tonight.
Inaudible. So you were freezing before? Okay, now we have maneuver. And we have general testo. Yes, and the parameters. Okay, this is not very true, I think. Let us check. We have GSOR, maneuver, so the compass is lit, and the SKD cover is open. The command has gone through. Great. Move on to the next stage. I'm on 4:37:11 is the time of SKD. Yes, copy that. Parus, please report continuously about the operation of the thrusters. Will do. Let's move on. So we have SKD operation. The pressure is nominal.